Thank you for that. So first, I'm going to start by just sharing a little bit about my story. And it would actually be helpful for me. Have any of you ever seen me talk before? Okay, good. So when I was 12, I convinced my parents to let me drop out of school and start homeschooling myself. So I had a bit of a non-traditional self-education where I designed and developed my own curriculum. And the first part of that was just building things that I wanted to build. Like I came across a free web page maker and built a website called MuggleNet, which grew to become the #1 Harry Potter website. So this is me with really, really, really high-tech, sweetness, awesome things like how to create web pages in 24 hours. Yes, this is back when you taught yourself how to make web pages from books. So MuggleNet grew to become the #1 Harry Potter website in the world. The site generated about 50 million page views a month, and I had to grow up really fast. But I learned a little bit about everything. I learned a little bit about how to write, how to code, how to edit, how to lead, how to manage, how to design. And eventually, I had to learn how to interact with people well because I was managing a part-paid, part-volunteer team of about 120. MuggleNet also grew to have a New York Times best-selling book. We had one of the biggest forums online, one of the biggest fan fiction sites, one of the biggest RPGs. We had the #1 podcast in the world. And I also was lucky enough to be invited to Scotland for a personal interview with J.K. Rowling. Actually, the way that it happened was kind of funny because it was so out of the blue. So I was sleeping. It was 8 o'clock in the morning. And my dad comes bursting into my room with a phone in his hand and a panicked look on his face. And he's like, "Emerson, it's Joe." And I'm thinking, why is some guy named Joe calling me at 8 o'clock in the morning? So he hands me the phone. I just woke up, so I'm like, "Hello? Hello, Emerson, this is Joe." And she wanted to know if I'd be interested in coming to her house in Scotland and interviewing her on the day of the release of the 6th book. Interested. But I played it cool. I said, "Joe, let me check my schedule. Maybe I can fit you in. Our people will talk." Now, she's like the coolest, most down-to-earth person that you could ever hope for somebody who's achieved the kind of success she's achieved. And I'm just also the luckiest guy in the entire world. So anyway, MuggleNet was an amazing set of learning experiences, one after the next. And I was also really cool. I used to wear a fanny pack. And I had a yo-yo with a holster, a leather holster. Also the height of fashion at the time in the chess community. Yes, I was a little strange. But I did learn a few things along the way. So my parents pretty much stayed out of my way, and they let me study whatever I wanted. But one thing they did do, which was really smart, was they had me read 4 short biographies of successful people every day. And this just shattered my little 12-year-old brain into about 10,000 pieces. And I started to think really big, and I had this epiphany. I said, I'm going to change the world. And so to figure out how to change the world, I was like, well, I should probably just study what other people who've already changed the world have done and then do that. It's simple, right? The kind of thing that when you're 12 seems simple. And so I started further investing myself into the lives of people who had already changed the world to see what patterns I could extract. And through this, I came to the conclusion, well, the more influence you have, the more impact you can create. And that set in motion a lifelong fascination with wanting to understand influence. And then there was one type of influence that really captured my imagination, which was virality. Because to me, virality was like having a human superpower. I mean, if you could make things go viral, you could tip elections, you could overthrow dictators, you could start movements, you could revolutionize entire industries. But can everyone hear me okay? Good. So fast forwarding a bit, I decided to go to college for fun. Bad reason. Bad. Got bored really fast, really predictably, and I was going to drop out and start another business. But at this point, I had already had success with the first business. I want to go really big with the next one. So I wanted to be able to connect dots and see patterns between different disciplines and industries. So I set a goal of reading 1 nonfiction book every day until graduation. So business, politics, psychology, economics, technology, science. And through this process, I also came to the conclusion that it's not just about how much you learn, it's about how much you can retain. And so I spent the first 6 months doing a really deep dive into the neuroscience of learning and memory. The idea being that learning how to learn is literally the most important thing you could ever learn because it's the root of everything else you learn. So it provides an exponential return on the time you invest in it. It is like the closest we can get to wishing for more wishes. So I ended up building out different spaced repetition schedules where I would review everything that I wanted to remember on a schedule of a day later, a week later, a month later, and then every 6 months in perpetuity. And the third part of the process was rehearsal. Now this part was harder. Like how do you actually practice applying all these ideas that you get from books? Because a book a day is an aggressive amount of information you have to be able to retain and then be able to use. So I organized all the information into frameworks to contextualize it. So I'd have a persuasion framework, a negotiation framework, an innovation framework. And when I was studying innovation, that was when my aha moment that led to the founding of the company kind of came to be. So the way that I practiced innovation was I would go through, I would compile all the different types of business models into a series of acronyms and like to be able to recall them quickly. And then I'd go to Walmart and I go from product to product to product on the shelves and take every product and apply every model to it to practice generating ideas for new products. So for example, I'll take something like a microphone like this and just say luxury, long tail, unused capacity. Like, could I just sell a super expensive, overpriced luxury microphone to people with enough disposable income? Long tail, could I let people customize their own microphones, et cetera, et cetera. So using this process, I generated thousands of billion-dollar ideas and got really interested in, which actually has the highest probability of becoming a billion-dollar business. And so I started to really get obsessed with this notion of probability of success. And it was a combination of the obsession with viral potential and probability of success that led to the first of a number of aha moments, which led to the start of the company. So we started off building a bunch of meme sites. So the first site was a website called Gives Me Hope, where people would share uplifting and inspiring true personal stories. It was like that website, if you guys remember that website, F My Life, it was like the opposite of that. And that one did very well. So an example of the kind of content you'd see there would be this one. My little sister came home from school one day and demanded I take her to the library so she could get books on sign language. I asked why. She told me there was a new kid at school who was deaf, and she wanted to befriend him. Today, I stood beside her at their wedding, watching her sign, I do. Aww. Yeah, a lot of people had that reaction. That story was shared over 500,000 times on Gives Me Hope alone. And so as a result, Gives Me Hope, through that story and a number of others, ended up going viral back in 2009. And then we just started making more sites like it. So we had a website with funny iPhone autocorrects that was doing about 2 billion page views a month. A lot of advice animal memes like, you've probably seen that guy, Velociraptor, before. Funny, ugly stick figure comics, which are called Rage Comics. Funny motivational posters, a website people share their secrets. And now, our 2 flagship sites are OMG Facts and Dose.com, 2 sites that you've probably seen or on the internet at some point. Collectively, the sites get about 50 million monthly unique visitors. Our content pillars, our content helps people learn, laugh, and feel inspired. Those are, not coincidentally, 3 of the most viral emotions possible, emotions that make you want to share with other people. So the kind of content you can see is things like, the 17 most mind-blowing maps you'll ever see, the kind of stuff you see people sharing. Just for some context on what that means, 50 million people a month is the equivalent of the entire population of Central America. And right now, at 50 million monthly uniques, we currently have about a United Center full of people that are currently on Dose. So let's talk about virality. Okay, so there's 2 concepts before I go. So I'm going to start at a super high, kind of 50,000 foot level, and then I'm going to go down to really, really, really specific actionable things that you can do. So one really key idea first is this notion of viral coefficient, which is basically how many, let's say I tell this really great joke to you, and you tell it to 2 people who tell it to 2 people, et cetera. The viral coefficient would be 2. If the viral coefficient is 1, then you get this linear growth forever, because there's always somebody who's hearing the joke. If it's less than 1, then eventually it peters out and dies. Things very, very rarely ever get to a viral coefficient of above 1. But look at what happens if you do. This chart shows viral coefficient of 1.2 is the green one. Look at this. It's only 1.2. It's only a little bit higher than the viral coefficient of 1, which is the red one, and 0.8, which is the blue one. So the key takeaway here is that tiny, tiny, tiny little changes can have an enormous impact in how viral something is. But there's a lot of little things that don't seem to matter, but actually matter a tremendous amount. The second idea is this notion of cycle time, which is basically like if I tell you this great joke and it takes you a month to tell somebody and then it takes them a month to tell somebody else, the cycle time would be 1 month. Now, in the internet, most things have a short cycle time. Like when you see a funny photo, you either share it right away or you don't share it at all. Right? You don't go back and I wonder if I've seen any good photos in the last few months. I should go look back and then share. Right? So cycle time is literally seconds. And so cycle time is relevant more for a business that's maybe like a restaurant that, people don't, refer people right away, but they might refer people in a month on average or 2 months. Another example of a slow cycle time might be like a social game, like Farmville, where, you're not really willing to spam all your Facebook friends in order to get, free cattle at first. But once you're fully hooked, and that might be 3 weeks later, then, suddenly now that really awesome piece of, decoration for your farm is worth sharing with your friends. So 2 things to keep in mind. If I just simplify everything I've learned about virality into one almost obnoxiously abstract and obvious idea, it's that the more incentive you give people to share, the more likely they are to share. That's obvious, right? Nothing controversial or interesting about that. And sometimes it can be something as simple as this. So this thing right here, you can't hum while holding your nose closed. This is a fact that we publish on OMG Facts like once a month, and it goes viral like every time. Because every time people see it who haven't seen it before, and they're like, what, that's crazy, and then they share it. And it always hits new clusters in the population. So we're going to start a new cluster right now. We're all going to try it right now, everyone. Silence. Yeah, it's way cooler when you do it than when you think about it. It doesn't sound that cool. But then you're like, I don't buy that. There's no way I can. And it creates this just little burst of happy, kind of positive emotion, which inspires you to share. So I'm going to break this down. If you want to create content that people actually share, it has to be really, really, really good. Really good. Because most content just does not inspire enough emotion to get somebody to be willing to share it. Now, it's true. There are some emotions that work much better than other emotions at inspiring sharing behavior. But way more important than the type of emotion is that they feel a lot of it. You've got to hit them in the face with the feels. Seriously, because what happens is like you're sitting there all day and you're kind of like, browsing the internet, click, 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 swipe, 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 and you read you go through hundreds and hundreds of things every single day. What is the one thing that you share? What's different about it? Well, it made you feel a lot, or you did it because you wanted to look cool. There's actually I kind of separate in 2 categories. People share things because they want to look cool, or because they feel a lot of stuff. So sharing things because they make you look cool. An example of this would be, this is what I'm talking about here. Like before you share something, you're always asking yourself the question, if I share this, will I look really smart to my friends? So this is the reason why people share like lots of business content, professional content. People will share it without even scrolling. Chartbeat releases a really interesting study showing that only 25% of people who shared an article scrolled. Think about that for a second. That should shock you to your bones. You consider what that means. That means only 1 in 4 people who shared an article even scrolled before hitting that share button. That meant that nobody read it. Because that's not why they shared it. They shared it because it made them, like they knew that if you share this, like you're going to look like you're really smart. Like you read the news, you're in the know, you're a concerned public citizen. You read this really smart, erudite, academic stuff about, important things like politics and business and stuff. So this is a huge percentage of sharing activity is because it's identity. It's the identity I want to promote to the world. This is also the reason why nobody shares porn. Going back to emotion, so this is true for many types of content. Like a lot of the content you produce will have this is a powerful motivator. The other one, again, is emotion-based virality, where like I feel so much of this that I have to share it with other people. And some emotions work better. For example, cute animals, humor, nostalgia. Everybody knows these work. They work because they make you feel good, and you feel kind of like this kind of good, not this kind of good. So they inspire sharing behavior. Also, anger is a very powerful viral emotion because when you're angry about something, you want to do something about it, right? Anger is like a high valence emotion. You don't want emotion that gets you sitting back in your chair slumping further, like anxious, depressed. Like these are not things that make you get up and start yelling from the rooftops, but anger works really well. It can also be dangerous and backfire, of course, but it certainly does inspire the same emotions that make you want to share. So an example of this is like I had this section on MuggleNet called the Wall of Shame. And the Wall of Shame was MuggleNet's most popular section for many years. The Wall of Shame is where I would get like 150 emails a day, and maybe like 1 out of the 150 would be from like somebody who's an idiot, and they're just criticizing me and saying really mean, nasty, stupid, and usually like sometimes hilariously stupid things. And I just created this section where I would just make fun of them publicly. And what happens is people would read this section, they would read these diatribes, people writing against me, and they would feel angry, like I was being mistreated. And they wanted to do something about it, like this anger. So many of them would email me and tell me they were sorry for me having to put up with this, but a lot of them would share with their friends, and that was a way to kind of rectify this injustice in the world. This is also the reason why, if you go to the front page of Reddit and you look at what's always in the front page of Reddit, there's at least 1 in 5 posts that's about Comcast. You don't even need to read the article to know that you should definitely upvote it because screw Comcast. So injustice porn is what they call on the internet. Like there's this injustice and you can right the wrong by upvoting this thing or by sharing it. So another thing is that when there's something that's in the atmosphere, everyone's talking about it. Like there's this new big news event, then there's a lot of energy in the atmosphere around it, and content about that can be more viral than it would otherwise be. So it could be a giant tragedy of some kind. It could be Harlem Shake, things like that. So here's where I get to the point where I tell you like what I think. Now we're out of this boring abstract stuff. Here's what I think you should actually do to create more viral, to be more viral online. And of course, when I say viral is a spectrum. Most things are never like super viral like this, but you can make it a little more viral, you can make it a little more shareable, and that can move the needle significantly for the business. So one problem that marketers have and people in general have is they try to be way too original, because there is this notion that originality by itself is valuable versus like, did you just create value for your audience or not? That's what you should be graded on. And so here's a good example. So George Takei, for those of you who don't know, he's a Star Trek actor from a very long time ago who now is like one of the most influential curators on the web. He has this Facebook page that has like 7 million likes, and he posts content and he gets like a zillion likes. Now, what does he do? George Takei doesn't try to make every funny joke himself or tell every story. George Takei just finds things around the internet that are going to be funny and interesting and relevant to his audience, and then he shares them. Like this one right here. For those of you who can't see, this is a picture of Mars, and this is Marvin Martian. Okay, let's analyze this. So the caption says, the first image has now been received from Curiosity on Mars. Okay, so why is this so viral? Well, first, let's go through the list. All right, is it funny? Yes, it's funny. Get it? Marvin Martian? And he's on Mars? It's funny. Okay, good. So now our feels are up to here. Let's say we started here, we were at this level of feels, and now we're up to here. The feels are real. Okay, but the feels aren't real enough for us to share it just yet. But, we've got another thing here. Not only is it funny, nostalgia, that's another powerful viral emotion, right? And nostalgia, get it? Remember Marvin Martian? Do you remember that? Do you feel those good childhood feels coming back to you right now? Okay, bam, we just upped our feels even more. What's hot? This is in the news. Curiosity, Mars, I heard about that stuff. I think that has something that's spacey. But I read the news. I know what this is. This is Curiosity. This is like serious news, politics stuff. So you get to look smart. I'll look smart if I share this with my friends. Well, maybe not that far, but I won't look stupid at least. And so all these things kind of play together to creating the image that we want to project. It's a hot news story. Everyone's talking about it. There's nostalgia. There's humor. And these create kind of a perfect storm of emotions, which then eventually lead to 311,000 shares, which is crazy. That is a lot of shares. It just really strikes a chord with people. So what's happening here? Now, there's I want to explain this from a different angle, how these things tend to spread. So first, we're going to go ahead and assume that this content was good enough for people to spread. Lots of feels. So when things spread, let's say that this is right here. This is the guy who originally created it. Let's say his name is Bill, and he's my college roommate, because that's totally the kind of thing that he would have actually made just in like 5 minutes in MS Paint for fun, and then posted it to his Facebook, and then hoped that like he got a couple chuckles, and then moved on. But he happens to have a friend who's in another dorm at Notre Dame where I went to school, and then he liked it, and then another friend in another dorm liked it, and then bam, it goes to this guy. This guy is really important. This guy is the bridge to all these other clusters in the population. And what if this guy wasn't online? What if he was on vacation in Mallorca or something, and he didn't see it, or he didn't like it because he's got bad taste? Well, it doesn't spread to these clusters. And so what happens is all the time, these really great ideas, these funny memes, pictures, stories, they just die. They get trapped in these little clusters, and they never break out because nobody was doing what George Takei did. George Takei might have seen it breaking out here and then posted it here, and then bam, it just spread everywhere. Now, in reality, George Takei usually posts it once it's already gotten pretty big already, but and then it spreads all these other clusters. Like this might be soccer moms in Tacoma. This might be League of Legends, nerds. This might be like there's all kinds of different universities, interest groups, countries. Like here's who gets to Norway, etc. It spreads from cluster to cluster to cluster, and that's why curation is so important, because you don't have to actually be the one to create the content from scratch. But if you're the one who realizes, oh man, this would be so good for my audience over here, and you show them, hey, there's this funny thing or this awesome thing or this smart thing that exists, you should know that it exists. You created as much value for that audience as if you created it yourself. So that's really important, because if you use as a starting point content, ideas, pictures, videos, et cetera, that already exist, and then you show your audience, hey, there's this thing, this video, this is an amazing video. You should totally check this out. Again, for your audience, you're creating as much value as if you made that entire video yourself. And your batting average is going to be way higher because you already have proof that it works because it's already been successful elsewhere on the web. Here's another way of looking at virality. I love visualizations, by the way, if you haven't noticed. because like they just help you see things in a way that you don't normally look at them. All right, so here's an example. Let's use this as the George Takei thing again. But let's say that this is already spread from like these tiny little clusters, and then bam, it gets to George Takei, and he's like a big, he's very influential because this goes out to 7 million people. Here's all 7 million people who see this this funny image of Martin the Martian. And what happens is, of course, the vast majority of people don't share it. Here's the first wave of shares. But let's say that 3% of people who saw it decided to share it. So 3% share it. And let's say that's like 3% of all these. But what happens is most of these people, they're not really influential. They don't have enough followers to really matter. And that's like this guy right here, bless his heart. He's just not a big influencer, this guy. But this guy is not super influential, but he has one guy who follows him who's really influential. So when he shares it and then his friend or someone who follows him sees it, bam, he spreads it to a much bigger audience. Interesting, right? This guy, though, is actually just super influential himself. So when this guy shares it, it goes out to 200,000 people. And there's this huge spread here. And then it just goes through generation after generation after generation. And then sometimes it breaks out in huge clusters like right here. What the hell is this? This is like on the third level of sharing, right? But nope, obviously this might have been a big account, a news account, a big Facebook page, something like that. So that's something to keep in mind. This is the spread of just one particular article as it goes through the web. You can see that it kind of dies out from generation to generation. This is a very viral thing, though, because most things never get to 7 generations of shares. Most things just die after 1 generation, maybe 2. Okay, here's where I get to the point where I'm going to talk like really, really, really narrow, actionable things you can do. First of all, from the perspective of which networks you should actually be spending time on, for most of you, Facebook is where you should be spending more time on than you are right now. Because Facebook has over 1 billion users. Facebook dwarfs all the other networks in terms of active users. It's not even close. Not even close. And it's really cool to be into like that new network, whatever it is, Snapchat, Instagram, but those networks are just flies. They're just like flies that are like swatting around Facebook compared to how big and how active Facebook really is. And the media loves talking about the new network, but don't forget that like the vast majority of social actions still happen on Facebook. And so for the average person in this room, I would say probably 70% of your time should be spent on Facebook and 30% for other networks. Now, other networks, it depends on what your business is. So these are the 4 that I would definitely make sure to be thinking about: Twitter, Pinterest, LinkedIn, and Instagram. If you're just going for like brand awareness, attention, things like that, then Instagram is good because it's very visual. You're not going to get conversions from Instagram, but you can get a lot of attention. Twitter is kind of only good for, like, the only 2 big groups of people who use Twitter are the media and celebrities. And then people who want to follow the media and follow celebrities. For everyone else, Twitter's not very relevant. So in this room, we're all biased. I think Twitter's a bigger deal than it actually is for most people. If you look at Twitter's activity, Twitter's got like a very tiny percentage of users who post almost all the content, all the activity on it, but Twitter is pretty irrelevant to most people. So the media loves it, creates this perception it's much bigger and more important than it is, but for most people, they're just not into Twitter. Pinterest is great for women. It's like a very heavily female site. It can be good for other groups too, but that's kind of the filter I would use, is like pictures, heavily image-based stuff, and for women. So this is just like a public service announcement. Like, stop overdoing hashtags on Twitter or anywhere else. Like, just think for a second what you look at when you see a tweet and half of the words are blue and half are black. How annoying is that? Okay, so marketers got this idea that like you should hashtag every word and somehow that creates value, but just think for a second on a human level how annoying it is to read tweets that have a ton of hashtags in them, and then stop doing that. And you'll see that it's better for your users. Also, self-promotion. There's also this general trend that has been in existence for a long time where like half of your tweets should be just retweeting fans saying good things about you. That is like, just stop and think about that for a second. No, just really think about that for 1 second. That's like being the equivalent like going to a cocktail party and being, just talking about yourself the entire time you're there, right? So don't do that. Okay, so tools. These are tools that are really helpful from a measurement perspective that I found anyway. The first two I want to talk about are these 2, growthtools.io and startupstash.com. So there are so many tools that make your life easier and solve problems that you have right now, and you think, man, this is a huge problem, this problem sucks, and you're spending so much time trying to solve it and failing, solving it poorly, or not solving it at all. And there's a tool out there somewhere that if you just found the tool, it would save you hundreds of hours of time or thousands and thousands of dollars. But you have to just do a little bit of searching to find that tool, and you have to know that it exists. And these are 2 good places to find those tools. So Startup Stash is a list of tools and resources for startups, and then Growth Tools is more for marketing stuff. This is like one of the highest ROI use of times things you can possibly do because there are so many tools now. Like back in the day, I know I sound like an old timer, back in my day, when I wanted to have a guest book for MuggleNet, I had to code it myself. Now there's like a million tools like that. Nothing's more complex than like a JavaScript plugin away. So for testing, Twitter counter is good for getting Twitter data. You've probably seen that. Bitly, of course, for tracking data. 5-second test is a good way to test things really easily and simply. Google Trends is good for seeing comparative results and how popular things are. And Alexa is good for seeing site traffic, and especially where the traffic is coming from, which is also really useful. You can see what percentage of traffic comes from Facebook or Google, et cetera. And then for finding things that are viral, these are some good resources. So Favstar is the best for Twitter. Favstar, you can go to Favstar, you can type in, let me give you an example of how this works. So if you want to figure out what should I tweet right now? Well, my advice would be tweet something that you know your audience is going to like, that you're going to get a lot of retweets, you're going to get a lot of favorites. That, by the way, when I talk about virality, that's what I mean. I mean, get more retweets and favorites on your post. That's a good way to think about it. Not go crazy front page of that doesn't really exist as a concept anymore, but all over Facebook. The way you do that is go to Favstar, type in a bunch of different names of accounts, Twitter accounts that you think would have a similar type of audience to you, look at what their best performing tweets are, and then use that to figure out what your audience is probably going to like. So for example, if you look at let's say that you've got a tech, your followers are all tech people, and you type in another tech account, and you see that there's this Steve Jobs quote that has a zillion retweets. Maybe you should tweet that Steve Jobs quote. No, seriously, if you do that, you will probably get a lot of retweets on it because you've already validated that, hey, this was tested against an audience similar to mine, it worked, it resonated, and then you tweet it, and bam, you get a ton of retweets. This is how I did this when I was first. My clout score was crazy high because this is all I did. I was I got to post stuff on Twitter, but I don't really want to do the normal stuff. So I'm just going to tweet stuff that I already know works. And so I just type in Twitter accounts that are similar to mine, look at the top performing tweets, and then use those to figure out what I should actually tweet on mine. A lot of quotes. If you look at the average number of retweets per quote that I post, it's really high because I'm not guessing. I only tweeted the ones that have a ton of retweets on accounts that are similar to mine. So you can do the same thing on Facebook with social bakers. Reddit is a good place for stuff like this too. Topsy's good. They're all different in different ways, but they all kind of get at the same thing. So I'd recommend trying them all out. But this, by the way, when I talk about how do you move the needle socially the easiest way, you're basically just doing what George Takei does from a curation perspective, but you're doing it against audiences you already know are similar to your audience, so you can test it. I can't express enough how easy, this is easy street for increasing your engagement on different social platforms. All right, so down to the lowest possible level of actionable things. All right, so here are some things that, there's a lot of things I could talk about that are the same kind of stuff you could get if you just Googled social media tips. These are not those things because you could just Google those things. These are things that we figured out work really, really, really well, that some of them are written about in different ways, but here's what we learned. So first of all, on Twitter's so noisy, and people tweet so often. Most people follow so many people on Twitter that you can tweet the same thing 3 times, 8 hours apart, and you will get 3 times as many people to see it as if you only tweeted it once. The reason why is because 2. 1, people 8 hours apart are in different time zones, or they're people who were not on Twitter 8 hours previously because it was the middle of the night, et cetera, et cetera. So you hit a different audience of people who already follow you. Second, again, Twitter is ephemeral. The feed refreshes really quickly. Most people don't go back and read their whole feed. They read whatever was tweeted in the last half hour or so, maybe the last hour. So you increase your probability of actually getting a tweet that's read if you tweet it more times. So bam, right there, that alone, that's a 3x bang for your buck. You write a tweet, you're gonna get 3 times as much value from it if you use this strategy. And when I say 3 times as many people will see it, I mean that. You can test it, you can look at the data. Our click-through rate is almost identical the third time we tweet it out as the first time we tweet it out, which is proof that it's all new people seeing it each time. So you don't have to worry about bothering your audience because it's not gonna be the same people who see it. So other things too, if you draw a little bit more attention to your tweets, this is true on most platforms. Twitter in particular is where we actually ran the data on this. For example, if you have a link, if you add a little arrow before it, more people will see it, thus more people will click it. If you want to get people to retweet it, you just need to ask them to retweet it, and you will see a significant bump in your share rate. But actually spell out the word retweet. We found that was better than saying RT. Putting the occasional word in caps in a non-obnoxious way, maybe once every other tweet, is also a good way to draw a little bit more attention to the tweets, which also makes it more likely they get read, and then thus they get shared and acted on. Same with the occasional word in caps, not overdone, but it can still help. And then if you want people to retweet your stuff, unless it's stuff that makes them look good to their boss, tweet it after working hours. Because no one wants to be seen retweeting, cats wearing pajamas during the working hours. Also, on Twitter, this is one thing I'm surprised not everyone's doing this yet. You should have every single tweet you post should have a photo in it. It will have a marked and significant increase in your performance. Just make sure there's a photo, even if the photo is of nothing. It doesn't matter. It just makes your post stand out. It's like buying an ad, but you could buy an ad in the newspaper and you get this one line of text, or you can buy a full page color ad for no extra cost. That's what it's like on Twitter. So every post you have should have a photo on it for that very reason. Also, let's talk about headlines for a second. This is another thing that from a content perspective is really, really important, and most people really, really, really suck at it. So with headlines, when you write headlines, remember this. The headline is the entire sales pitch to get somebody to click on the link. If you fail at making something that people want to click, they will not click it, and you will have wasted every minute of time and money you spent on the creation of the content itself. So it's kind of like in vogue to hate on clickbait for headlines. And to me, it's interesting as a concept because it sort of like harkens back to an era of not thinking of the headline as being in any way, shape, or form a sales pitch, but it is. That is it. The headline is a sales pitch. Now, you can be scummy and lie in your sales pitch, just like you can be scummy and lie in any sales pitch. Now, what's going to happen is people are going to click it, they're going to be disappointed and hate you. So that's why it's not a good strategy to lie in your headline, but you should write good headlines, just like you're not going to sell good products unless you have a good sales pitch. It's the same sort of thing. So from a headline perspective, first of all, you should practice it, study what good headlines are, and then do a little bit of testing. And I don't mean you have to do anything crazy or robust. Like our whole system is built on algorithms designed to help us identify the best. So like the way that our model basically works is that we create and distribute viral content by using algorithms to identify which content has the highest viral potential, and then we run it through a bunch of different rounds of testing using machine learning models to help us identify which variations on that content are going to have the highest viral coefficient. And you don't have to do anything crazy advanced, like we use Bayesian probability matching methods and things like that to help us identify the best headline. What you can do is just, if you write it, let's say it's a blog post, for example. You got a blog post, you spent 2 hours in that blog post. You should at least spend however much time you spent on the content itself, you should at least spend 10% of that time on your headline testing process. A very simple process could be as simple as write 20 headlines, cut out the 15 or so that obviously suck and are not as good, and then for the 5 that are remaining, send it to 5 people quickly. People that are on GChat, people that are nearby you in the office, 5 friends you can email to and say, hey, which 2 or 3 of these would you be most likely to click? And then look at the ones that get the most votes and just pick one of those. That alone is like you'll be halfway there towards like a robust, like testing process. And you will see a huge increase in how many people actually read your content using a simple headline testing process like this. Think about it like this. If you're going to give a great speech and you give it to an empty room, what was the point? And that's what it's like when you sit there and I spent like 2 hours working on my talk and then I didn't think at all about my title and no one showed up for my presentation. That's a problem. So headlines are your whole sales pitch. Don't forget that. So also, putting content into list format is like an easy, hacky way to like make more people read it and make them care more about it and make more people finish it. The brain loves lists. It's also kind of cool to hate on lists as being like a thing that we're all kind of beneath, but lists are just a better way of presenting information. And I would try to jam as many things into list format as you possibly can. Also use odd numbers. For some reason, they work a little bit better. Our theory is that like odd numbers are a little bit less common than even numbers. So the brain's like, ooh, this is novel, this is new, I should pay more attention to this, and then more likely to click it. Other things too, from a writing perspective, brevity, obviously important, but a few different things here. One, long sentences are bad. People do not like reading long sentences, so try to change every comma to a period. The more easier stuff is to read, more people will read it, thus more people will share it. Also, imagine someone's paying you $1,000 for every word that you remove. Paragraphs, think about it like this. What happens when you look at a giant big block of text? What does your brain say? Fuck that. Break it up into smaller paragraphs. Never have more than 2 or 3 sentences in a row without breaking up a new paragraph. By the way, why did I say fuck that? Why didn't I say screw that? Exactly, because it gets in a reaction. And when you swear, it's more memorable than when you don't swear. I'm not saying you should be using profanity all the time, but selectively, it can be really, really, really powerful to help cement a point, to make it stick more. Another thing too, from a content perspective, if you add a next button to the page, it doesn't matter where it goes. The point is that some people don't want to choose what to do next. They just want you to put a big button there that says next. They want to keep going. They like your content. They want more of it. They don't want to choose. And so you'll get people to read more of your content. Another important thing too, from a sharing perspective, is this concept of honeymoon period. Just like when you first get married, there's this blissful, post-marriage period where, everything's hunky-dory and awesome, and you just rave to everybody how great life is. It's the same thing with most things that you share. You either share quickly or you don't share at all. So if you want people to share, ask them to share right there. Like use huge share buttons. Make sure the share buttons are on the page all the time. Like you got a big long article, like there should be share buttons there all the time. These are things that matter. If you're going to put up like a little pop-up or something that says, like, please share this, the first time they visit is the best possible time to do it. That's very, very important. I think that's what I have for the quick takeaways.